I cannot here give references and authorities for my several statements, and I must trust to the reader, reposing some confidence in my accuracy. If everyone was cast in the same mold, there would be no such thing as beauty. It is so important to bear in mind the probability of conversion from one function to another. If it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed, which could not possibly have been formed by numerous, successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. The limit of man's knowledge in any subject possesses a high interest, which is perhaps increased by its close neighborhood to the realms of imagination. Evolution is written on the wings of butterflies. But a plant on the edge of a desert is said to struggle for life against the drought, though more properly, it should be said to be dependent upon the moisture. It appears to me, the doing what little one can to increase the general stock of knowledge is as respectable an object of life as one can in any likelihood pursue. What wretched doings come from the ardor of fame, the love of truth, alone would never make one man attack another bitterly. One general law, leading to the advancement of all organic beings, namely, multiply, vary, let the strongest live, and the weakest die. If it wasn't for seasickness, all the world would be sailors. If the misery of our poor be caused not by the laws of nature, but by our institutions, great is our sin. Freedom of thought is best promoted by the gradual illumination of men's minds, which follows from the advance of science. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but rather the one most responsive to change. A fair result can be obtained only by fully stating and balancing the facts and arguments on both sides of each question. On the ordinary view of each species, having been independently created, we gain no scientific explanation. I am like a gambler, and love a wild experiment. The structure of every organic being is related, in the most essential yet often hidden manner, to that of all the other organic beings. The highest possible stage in moral culture is when we recognize that we ought to control our thoughts. Man is developed from an ovule, about of an inch in diameter, which differs in no respect from the ovules of other animals. A man's friendships are one of the best measures of his worth. False facts are highly injurious to the progress of science, for they often endure long, but false views, if supported by some evidence, do little harm, for every one takes a salutary pleasure in proving their falseness. Free will is to mind, what chance is to matter. The mystery of the beginning of all things is insoluble by us, and I for one must be content to remain an agnostic. Species of the same genus would occasionally exhibit reversions to lost ancestral characters. Through his powers of intellect, articulate language has been evolved, and on this, his wonderful advancement has mainly depended. The question of whether there exists a creator and ruler of the universe has been answered in the affirmative by some of the highest intellects that have ever existed. Our ancestor was an animal which breathed water, had a swim bladder, a great swimming tail, an imperfect skull, and undoubtedly was an hermaphrodite. Here is a pleasant genealogy for mankind. I am a firm believer that without speculation, there is no good and original observation. A pleasurable and excited state of mind, associated with affection, is exhibited by some dogs in a very peculiar manner, namely, by grinning. The love for all living creatures is the most noble attribute of man. Certainly, no fact in the long history of the world is so startling as the wide and repeated exterminations of its inhabitants. I am not apt to follow blindly the lead of other men. I have always maintained that, excepting fools, men did not differ much in intellect, only in zeal and hard work, and I still think there is an eminently important difference. I must begin with a good body of facts, and not from a principle, in which I always suspect some fallacy, and then as much deduction as you please. An American monkey, after getting drunk on brandy, would never touch it again, and thus is much wiser than most men. The very essence of instinct is that it's followed independently of reason. It was evident that such facts as these, as well as many others, could only be explained on the supposition that species gradually become modified, and the subject haunted me. The imagination is one of the highest prerogatives of man. If I had my life to live over again, I would have made a rule to read some poetry, and listen to some music at least once every week. One may say there is a force, like 100,000 wedges. Natural selection almost inevitably causes much extinction of the less improved forms of life, and induces what I have called divergence of character. The tree of life should perhaps be called the coral of life, base of branches dead, so that passages cannot be seen. This again offers contradiction to constant succession of germs in progress. A man who dares to waste 1 hour of time has not discovered the value of life. Ignorance more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge. It is those who know little, not those who know much, who so positively assert that this or that problem will never be solved by science. One hand has surely worked throughout the universe. But natural selection, as we shall hereafter see, is a power incessantly ready for action, and is immeasurably superior to man's feeble efforts, as the works of nature are to those of art. Origin of man now proved. Metaphysics must flourish. He who understands Baboon would do more towards metaphysics than Locke. Such simple instincts as bees making a beehive could be sufficient to overthrow my whole theory. We stopped looking for monsters under our bed when we realized that they were inside us. Intelligence is based on how efficient a species became at doing the things they need to survive. In the long history of humankind, and animal kind too, those who learn to collaborate and improvise most effectively have prevailed. We must, however, acknowledge, as it seems to me, that man with all his noble qualities still bears in his bodily frame the indelible stamp of his lowly origin. Nothing is easier than to admit in words the truth of the universal struggle for life, or more difficult, at least I have found it so, than constantly to bear this conclusion in mind. Man selects only for his own good. Nature only for that of the being, which she tends. Great is the power of steady misrepresentation. There is no fundamental difference between man and animals, in their ability to feel pleasure and pain, happiness and misery. We are not here concerned with hopes or fears, only with truth, as far as our reason permits us to discover it. We are always slow in admitting any great change, of which we do not see the intermediate steps. Which quote did you like the most? Share your opinion in the comments. Don't miss the chance to see the next video. Subscribe now.